Hi y'all, welcome and welcome back to this video on Plato's Crito, Law, Justice, and the Social Contract. Before we get started, yes, I do have a Texas accent. I'm probably mispronouncing Crito and I apologize, but that's the way I speak, so this is where we are. Let's get started. When we think about the origins of social contract theory, the idea that citizens and governments have mutual duties, Plato's Crito is one of the earliest and most powerful starting points. In this short dialogue, Socrates sits in prison, awaiting execution, when his friend Crito arrives with a plan to help him escape. What follows is not a story of action, but a profound conversation about justice, moral obligation, and what it means to live rightly within a community. Crito challenges us to think about questions that remain deeply relevant today. What do we owe to the laws that govern us? Is it ever right to disobey authority? And how should we balance loyalty to conscience with loyalty to the state? It is dawn in Socrates' prison cell. The city of Athens still sleeps, and Crito has bribed the guards to enter. He pleads with Socrates to escape before the executioners come. Crito's reasons are heartfelt and practical. He doesn't want his friend to die. He fears what people will say if he does nothing, and he believes Socrates has been treated unjustly. Socrates listens patiently, but refuses. His calmness surprises Crito. Instead of acting on fear or friendship, Socrates insists they must reason together about what is right. For him, philosophy is not something you practice only in debate halls. It's a way of living and dying. Crito's case appeals to common sense and emotion. He argues that Socrates has a duty to live, for his friends who need him, for his children who would grow up without a father, and for his reputation, which would suffer if people thought his friends were too stingy or cowardly to save him. Crito insists that the trial was unjust. Since Socrates was wrongfully condemned, why should he feel bound to obey the verdict? Wouldn't escaping simply correct an earlier wrong? It's a deeply human argument, one that values love, loyalty, and justice in a personal sense. But Socrates sees the problem differently. Socrates begins with a statement that defines his entire moral philosophy. One must never do wrong. Even if others act unjustly toward us, it is never right to repay injustice with injustice. Escaping from prison, he argues, would harm the laws and the moral order of the city. He asks what kind of city would Athens become if anyone disobeyed laws whenever they disagreed with them? Laws, like the body's bones, give shape and strength to society. To break them out of self-interest would be to fracture that structure. In a striking move, Socrates personifies the laws of Athens, giving them a voice. The laws remind him that they nurtured and protected him from birth. They allowed his education, his marriage, and his entire way of life. By choosing to remain in Athens his whole life, he implicitly agreed. He gave tacit consent to live under its laws. To escape now would be to break that agreement. This idea of tacit consent is what makes Crito so important for political philosophy. Socrates is not talking about a written contract, but a moral one. When we live within a society, accept its benefits, and enjoy its protection, we also agree to respect its laws. This is the seed of social contract theory, the principle that social order depends on mutual agreement between individuals and the community. Later thinkers will build on this foundation. Hobbes will argue that laws prevent chaos and violence. Without them, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Locke will claim that legitimate government rests on the consent of the governed and that citizens may resist tyranny when consent is violated. Rawls will reimagine the contract as a thought experiment about fairness and equality. Martin Luther King Jr., drawing on these traditions, will insist that breaking an unjust law can be morally justified when done openly, responsibly, and with respect for law's true purpose. Socrates' decision not to escape is not about obedience for its own sake. It's about integrity, the harmony between belief and action. He tells Crito that living rightly is more important than simply living. To act unjustly would harm his soul and contradict everything he has taught. In the Apology, Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. In the Crito, he shows us what that means in practice. Examination for him is not just reflection, it's accountability. To examine one's life is to act on principle even when the cost is death. The issues raised in Crito, obedience, justice, conscience, remain central to moral and political thought. Every society must ask, what holds us together? What makes law legitimate? When must individuals obey, and when must they resist? When Hobbes speaks of order, Locke of consent, Rawls of fairness, or King of civil disobedience, each is, in some sense, continuing the conversation Socrates began in that prison cell. The dialogue between Crito and Socrates becomes the first step in a long philosophical journey towards understanding our duties as citizens and moral agents. In refusing to flee, Socrates accepts death rather than betray his principles. His choice shows that justice and virtue are not abstract ideals. They are commitments lived out in action. For Socrates, morality cannot depend on convenience, emotion, or popular opinion. It must rest on reason, truth, and a sense of duty to what is right. That conviction has echoed throughout centuries of thought, shaping every later vision of the social contract. As you read Crito, consider your own relationship to the laws and institutions that govern your life. Do you agree with Socrates that moral integrity sometimes requires obedience, even when the law is unjust? Or do you side with thinkers like Locke and King, who argue that true justice sometimes demands principled resistance? Either way, the questions Socrates faced remain ours to answer. All right, y'all, that's all for now. Thanks for putting up with my voice going in and out. Also, a little bit of that is because I get super emotional about Socrates and his life and his death and what he stood for. I've been doing this for over 10 years and I still get emotional when I think about that. I mean, very impactful if you really think about what he did and what he said and the way he lived. Anyway, you might disagree about the decisions that he made. Think about those things. Thank y'all for watching. Have a great day.